Good evening. Welcome. Gonna wait a moment for Facebook to kick in. It's thinking. A little bit of a technical difficulty getting it started. I think either it's freezing or whatever it may be. Not my expertise, but hopefully it'll be up and running shortly. Anyway, Facebook will come when it comes. We are continuing to discuss the laws of Shabbos. Do me a quick favor. If you're watching this video, just put something in the live chat or put a thumbs up so I know that you're watching. You don't have to say your name. If you want to hide behind the screen, that's fine. I just want to know if if someone's watching. We are discussing the laws of lighting candles before Shabbos. Yesterday we discussed the concept that the wick has to be a good wick, has to light well. The oil has to be good oil, which lights well. It's not just because you want a nice fire, but we have an issue of potentially doing something to make the light burn better. So you're sitting by a candle and it's starting to light and it's not lighting well. You may kind of automatically or subconsciously just instinctively, you grab your hand and you try to fix the candle, which is not allowed on Shabbos. So make sure that the wick is good and the oil is good. It's the type of wick which burns well, type of oil which pulls towards the wick, and you'll be good. Then we went on to discuss another concept. That is, and you have to visualize olden day candles, which you're not dealing with a candle which is congealed wax, congealed fats, and a wick, but you have an oil lantern of some sort. And many of these oil lanterns, they drip oil. So what people would do back then is they would put some type of bowl, a plate, a dish under that oil to capture the dripping oil and frankly, to reuse it. We discussed yesterday that on Shabbos, a person is prohibited from putting this dish under the oil candle. Let's call it a lantern. The reason is because and it's a principle, I'll say it in Hebrew, levatel kli mehechanoi. It's prohibited to take a vessel, a dish, and make it unfit for use. Just like you can't take a plate and throw it on the ground and break it and destroy it, make it unfit for use on Shabbos. Similarly, you can't do something which halachically will cause this plate or bowl, any dish, to become unfit for use on Shabbos. Why is it unfit for use? Because that oil, which is dripping down from the candle on Shabbos, is prohibited. And because the plate is carrying that, it's in that plate, the whole plate is not usable. So you can't put a plate on Shabbos under that candle because it's going to cause it to drip onto the plate. The plate becomes prohibited, and therefore you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. However, to clarify, if you put it on before Shabbos, then that's okay. If you put the candle, the plate under that lantern before Shabbos, and that happened, it's fine. Now, we're up to Gimel. But let's assume that this plate has something else in it. Let's say you have a salt shaker. A salt shaker you're allowed to move it, right? On Shabbos, nothing wrong with that. And if you put it in a plate, then the plate is also movable. So just because the plate gets some oil in it, which would be prohibited, it doesn't make the entire plate unfit for use on Shabbos, and therefore you're allowed to do it. I want to clarify for two reasons. First of all, just complicated. And second of all, it's a principle in the laws of Shabbos, and it's really important to understand this. It'll be helpful when we go further. Although these laws maybe seem a little bit abstract, and we're not really dealing with oil candles today, and definitely not concerned about the oil that's going to drip out of those candles. But let's use this spot as an opportunity to learn and understand how the laws of Shabbos, if I could use the word, the science of the laws of Shabbos work. When it comes to muktzah, as mentioned yesterday, there are three categories of muktzah. There's muktzah because the item itself is prohibited. Like it's a candle that's burning. You're not allowed to move it on Shabbos. Okay? Then you have other forms of muktzah without getting into all the details. It's a tool which is used for something. It's a hammer, for example. Now you can't start banging things on Shabbos, so the hammer is not allowed. You don't need it. Then there are things which you don't need them at all. You're disgusted by them. You put them aside. You're not going to touch them on Shabbos. Various forms of muktzah. Not only is something which is used for a malacha, for something which is prohibited on Shabbos, muktzah, you can't touch it on Shabbos. But if something, let's say money, is on a table on Shabbos, the entire table becomes muktzah. Now, it would have to be in a case where the money was put on a table by you, on your table, before Shabbos began, and then the whole table becomes what's called a basis. It's a reliance or support for this money. So money is muktzah, the table becomes muktzah. So if you have a plate on Shabbos, and there are money in the plate, there are coins in the plate now is muktzah, not just the money. However, if you had this plate, it's not just a basis, it's not just a support for something which is muktzah because it's money, but it's also a support for something which is permitted to use on Shabbos. For example, it's a support for a salt shaker. So now you could lift that plate even if there's money on it, because it's not only a support for something which is forbidden, for money, it's a support for other things as well. And that's the general concept, that if there's something permitted on it, you're allowed to. A famous example of this is when it comes to Hanukkah. When it comes to Hanukkah, we say that the table or the chair which you placed your menorah on Friday evening, before Shabbos began, you lit the menorah. This is now, menorah is muktzah, right? And the chair or the stool that it's on is also muktzah, because it's a support for the menorah. But if you put a siddur, a prayer book on it, you put something else on the table, on the stool, or whatever your menorah is before Shabbos began, now you can move the actual stool as well, because it's not only a support for muktzah, it's also a support for other things that's permitted. So let's get back to our case. You have a candle with oil. The oil is dripping. You want to capture that oil. So you take the plate and you put it under there on Shabbos. The oil is muktzah. You can't use that oil on Shabbos. It's for lighting, and it's coming from a burning candle. You're not allowed to use it on Shabbos. It's muktzah. That plate you cannot put there, because you're going to cause the plate to become muktzah. However, if you put something else on the plate before, and the plate goes, then you put the plate under the lantern, and then the oil starts to drip in. Even though you want that oil, you could move the plate once the candle stops burning or once the oil stops dripping, because there's something else on it. Principle in the Shabbos, very important to know. In addition, another way to do this, is you could put, let's assume that you have a chandelier and it's oil burning and it drips. So you have a beautiful glass dish which is collecting the oil that drips in. One of the ways that you could deal with this is that under the table, put that dish. And then when you're done eating on Shabbos, halacha says you can move that table away, and now it drips. Or when you expect it'll start to drip or whatever, if you think it's later on after the candle is burning, you could do it that way. But the point is that if you're not moving it, you can still make use out of it, as long as you put it there before Shabbos started, and you're moving the table, you're not doing anything on your own to the actual dish, again, to levatal kli me'echanei, to ruin, to nullify it, to disrupt this vessel from its usage. Let's continue. If you're dealing not with oil burning, but you're dealing with a candle, a wax candle, right? Typical, let's say, beeswax, and you expect that it's going to drip, you could put a dish under it even on Shabbos, and it doesn't become muktzah. Why? Because you have no problem just to turn over the dish and have the wax drip off. You don't care about that. Why? Because you're not really collecting the oil. When you have an oil dish, an oil candle, and you want to collect the oil that drips, it's because you want to save it to use it again. You want to reuse that oil. But if you are using a beeswax candle, then there's no issue, because when it drips, it's just dripping down into just for convenience. You're not trying to keep it. Because you're not trying to keep it, it does not become muktzah. You just spill it out. Also, if you have a certain case where there's sparks that you're concerned are going to fall and it's dangerous, the candle is burning. And for whatever reason, at your Shabbos table, you notice that it's starting to sparkle. And some sparks are falling out. It's dangerous. So you get hurt, or you make a hole in your tablecloth, whatever. You could put a dish under there, and it will not become muktzah, because these sparks don't have a mamashas. They don't have anything real to it. When it hits it, it gets extinguished. So it doesn't make it muktzah. And therefore, even after the sparks fell into it, you could still move that dish. However, it's very important that when you do put the dish there, there's no water in it. Because when there's water in it, you're causing the sparks to get extinguished, even though you're not the one doing it. But in other words, the spark is going into the water. You're not actually pouring water on it, but you're causing it to happen, and therefore you're not allowed to do it. And not only that, but you're not allowed to do it even on Friday before Shabbos begins. You can't put a dish with water expecting something to get extinguished. Okay? For example, if you have a candelabra and you don't have the holders for the candle, you cannot put some water in there and expect that when it gets extinguished, it'll go out, because you're causing that. You can't even do it before Shabbos, because when you do it before Shabbos, it's a gzeira. We're concerned a person may do it on Shabbos also. So not only can you not put a dish with water in a place where you expect a candle may fall, or a candle may extinguish itself, sparks may come out. You can't put water there on Shabbos, and you can't put water there before Shabbos, anticipating that, because it's a gzeira, it's a decree. You may end up doing it on Shabbos itself. I do want to say, though, that if something is burning on Shabbos, let's say a candle fell, heaven forbid a person's tablecloth is starting to burn, you're not allowed to extinguish it on Shabbos, right? That would be forbidden. You can't extinguish it because it's Shabbos. The only time you'd be able to do it if someone's life was in danger. But if you could just walk out of the house and take everyone else out of the house, there's no life in danger. You have to wait till somebody that's not a non-Jew, doesn't keep Shabbos, is going to call the fire department. They're going to come, they're going to extinguish it, and so on. But you're watching this, and if you could extinguish, if it was during the week, you just pour a cup of water on it and stop it, while it's tiny. Shabbos, you can't do that. What you are allowed to do is you can put water around, that when it stretches and it comes to the water, it'll extinguish itself, which is slightly different than this case where you're putting it there to receive it. You want to stop the spreading, which you extinguish on its own when it gets there. You're not pouring water on the fire, but you're putting cups of water around it. When it goes, it will extinguish. However, you have floating candles. When you have a floating candle, the way it works is you put a small candle in water, and it floats up. The candle's floating on the water. That you are allowed to do before Shabbos starts. Because the point of it is, not in the candle. The example he uses here, it's an interesting question if it applies to floating candles, but the example he's using here is for oil. If you have, this is coffee, but if you have a large cup and you want to use oil, we know that oil rises to the top. So what you would do is you would put water halfway and then add oil. So you don't have to put so much oil, and the candle, the flame is all the way on top. So in that case, you're putting water and then oil. When the oil finishes, the wick will extinguish. That's allowed. Why? Because the water is not causing the extinguishing of the fire. The oil itself is going to finish, and the fire will end. You're not. You're just lifting the oil, not to ruin the glass around it. Okay. But if it wasn't a case where you're pouring water and that water could cause the fire to get extinguished right away, that would be a problem. Clearly a problem. Okay. Another example of this, and again, this is not so common to come across. Well, I remember when I was a child, at the public siddurim that my father would lead, still does, but those, the public siddurim, talking about hundreds of of people at a Seder, the way they did the candles was they had a big tray, actually on a table, huge tray with sand, and they stuck candles into the sand. So it's accomplishing the same thing. When the fire of the candle reaches the bottom, it gets extinguished in the sand. It's safe. The sand holds it and makes sure it doesn't further. That is allowed because unlike water, the sand is not extinguishing the flame. The sand is stopping the flame from continuing to burn. It doesn't allow it to burn more. It's not the same activity as extinguishing, which would be prohibited. With that, we conclude the laws of lighting Shabbos candles and the details involved in the wicks and the oil, where to light, who should light, and these technical stuff regarding putting dishes under it and dealing with oil. We had the opportunity to talk a little bit about muktzah and so on. The next section is going to talk about what happens if you're walking outside and it gets dark and you have in your pocket a wallet, you have a pen, you have something which is muktzah, and you're in a place that you can't carry anymore. What are your options? Join us tomorrow evening, it's Hashem, 7:40, for learning on this topic. Good night, and once again, please like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.